Hi, friends, and welcome to 15241 Today Talk. Jim Render and I are extremely pleased to have a dear friend of ours join us, a gentleman who is originally from Newcastle, Pennsylvania, a pioneer in sports medicine, the founder of Tri-State Orthopedics. I'm talking about Jack Failla, who is with us. Jack, let me first of all ask you, at what point in your life in Newcastle did you decide that I want to be an orthopedic specialist?
Well, I didn't know I wanted to be a doctor, but my mother thought I should probably be a doctor, and I didn't think about becoming an orthopedic surgeon until my first knee injury playing football at Newcastle High School. And I was really convinced after my second knee injury at Marquette University, where I interestingly played on their last football team. So then I knew that somebody had to figure some of this stuff out, and so orthopedics became a no-brainer.
I mentioned a moment ago that you're one of the pioneers when it comes to sports medicine. I'm sure there are a lot of people now that would be baffled by how far behind sports medicine was until a group of you gentlemen and women stepped forward to pioneer and to put it all together.
Well, I realized when I was in my my residency at the University of Pittsburgh, I was charged with taking care of the football team, and one of the players I was taking care of was Tony Dorsett, by the way, and I was amazed that we were simply there to patch up wounds and to take care of problems. And of course they had a strength and conditioning coach, but there wasn't a whole lot of science brought into it. And when I finished my residency and went into practice, I decided that because I was reading about Curlin Job, Dr. Frank Job, and his partner out in LA, and what they were doing, they were starting to bring science into the evaluation of athletes. So it was targeted performance testing. And I thought that was a good idea, so my partner and I, Roger Ferguson, we started the first sports medicine center in Pittsburgh, and that was in the basement of North Hills Passerman Hospital. So,
Jim, you know Jack for a number of years.
Thanks to you, and he was also the team doctor for the North Allegheny Tigers, and I used to snarl at him, because he was part of the enemy. But I don't know if it was mentioned yet that you became the team doctor for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Can you tell how that came to be?
It's an interesting story. My professor, Dr. Ferguson, who had been the long-term orthopedic surgeon for the Pirates, Albert Ferguson, who's since passed, he was a good friend of Joel Brown, and but what was interesting is he never set foot one time in the locker room of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And what happened was it was the dawn of arthroscopy in sports medicine, and several of the Pirate players, namely Stargell and Parker and a couple other people, were going elsewhere for medical care. And when Dr. Ferguson was asked about arthroscopy, which I was embracing, I was really interested in it because it seemed like an state-of-the-art thing that was going to be a big game changer in sports medicine. His comment was that he thought it was a triumph of technology over reason, and that ended his career as the Pirate orthopedic surgeon. So because I had the first sports medicine center, I got an interview with, had lunch with Harding Peterson, Murray Cook, Branch Rickey Jr., and Chuck Tanner. And they wanted to know, what my thoughts were, because at that time the Dodgers were getting a lot of publicity for their program. And of course, a lot of their players were actually staying in LA in the off season. So they had an off season conditioning program, et cetera. And one of the Pirates' problems and complaints was that they had a lot of injuries, particularly in spring training. So I told them, I said, I think that players should have an off-season conditioning program with an emphasis on stretching and flexibility, that there should be a targeting testing of the players to try to understand what their problems and weaknesses may be and how to improve their performance. And I said, I think they ought to come into spring training in shape. I think spring training ought to be, in my opinion, you guys are the baseball guys, I said, in my opinion, they should come there to hone their skills in baseball, not to get in shape. And I said, as Bud Wilkinson once said, you show me a team that plays itself into shape and I'll show you a losing team. Chuck Tanner immediately pops up and says, well, how many World Series did Bud Wilkinson ever win? This is 1980, by the way, 1980-81. And I said, how many 56-game winning streaks have you had, Chuck? So I think that got me the job.
Got his attention.
Yes, yes.
Pardon me, I'm just sitting here thinking how dumb I am. I did this introduction of my good friend Jack, and I forgot to mention that he was the former orthopedic doctor for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and that's the reason that Jack and I have become great friends over the years. So you step in. You said 80, 81. This is right after the 79 season. So was there indeed a lot of resistance to what you wanted to do and was quite certain it needed to be done?
There was no resistance. In fact, I think they appreciated my candor and they already knew that the Dodgers were ahead of the game. So they were looking for something different. In fact, so when I walked into the locker room for the first time, the training room, et cetera, there wasn't one piece of exercise equipment in the entire Pirate organization, except for one. And it was Willie Stargell's. It was a sawed-off bat handle, and he had a 5-pound plate taped on the end, and he would just sit there at his locker, and he would just exercise his wrist and his forearm, okay? The other funny part, there's a funny story about that. So I go in the training room, and Tony Barnum is in there, and he's using an ultrasound machine on one of the players. And I go over and I look at the ultrasound machine, and I said to Tony, I said, how often do you get this calibrated? He goes, I never get it calibrated. I said, Tony, it's not working. He said, they don't know the difference. So I knew that there was a lot of room for improvement and upgrading, and thanks to Harding Peterson, they pretty much gave me carte blanche on bringing in Nautilus equipment, because Nautilus was a big thing at the time. We brought in Cybex machines, which stuff that we had at our sports medicine center in the North Hills, and we started, examining ranges of motion, strengths, and we figured out, along with Curl and Job, that the pitchers, if you ever look at a pitcher, they're not symmetrical. Their dominant side is about anywhere from 10 to 25% larger than their other side. And I took care of a player one time. His name was Lee Smith. He was so strong. He was a Cubs pitcher. He was about a 6'5", very strong guy. And he actually had a curve in his spine because of the increase in strength. So we would, range of motions were greater on the throwing side, and so we tested guys that had no problems first, and successful pitchers, and found out what their parameters were, and because I found out there was a lot of consistencies, and so we were able to then have baselines on players, and then once they got injured or hurt, then we could bring them back to their baseline.
Did you get some of the players to buy in of staying in Pittsburgh in the off season and training?
Yes, a lot of them did, including Barry Bonds for a long time. That's when we finally got up. Well, I'm thinking primarily because at that time we were in Three River Stadium, or no, we were in Three River Stadium at the time, And we did have a weight room, and I helped in getting hired a strength and conditioning coach, which was Warren Sipp. And we put together a booklet that we sent every player, things for, dietary suggestions and things they could do even if they weren't in Pittsburgh, and throwing programs and, aerobic and anaerobic activities. And I think they all embraced it because it was the dawn of larger contracts, and they knew that if they wanted to make big money, they had to take care of themselves. And so it was easy to sell them. When I started in '81, we had a bunch of old-time players, and some of them didn't think a whole lot of doing things in the off season. But once we were around them for a while and they started to respect us and believe us, then and of course Kent Biggerstaff, my trainer, that I was very fortunate to get hired in 1982, I believe, helped a lot.
Jack, I know from firsthand experience that you were there all the time. Not only did you have your practice with Tri-State, but you were at almost every Pirate home game. And then another decision that you made was hiring Kent Biggerstaff to work alongside Tony Bartiromo initially, and then Kent became the head trainer. Your comments about those aspects of your time with the Pirates?
Well, Biggie was a wonderful, wonderful addition to the and he was so diplomatic because he didn't want to make Tony Bartiromo feel threatened, and nor did I. And by the way, a lot of people don't realize that Tony Bartiromo had no training whatsoever to be a trainer. He went from a AAA first baseman in Columbus to the Pirate trainer all within a couple months. And but Kent and the director of our sports medicine center, Steve Hoffman, brought conditioning to a different level. And when we had players like Barry Bonds and particularly Barry was, a lot of people, aside from his personality traits, he was one of the hardest workers I'd ever seen. And he paid attention to a lot of details, and he had and part of that reason, and I think why he got to the next level, was because he had a great relationship with Kent Biggerstaff, and he would do anything that Biggie told him to do. Biggie being Kent Biggerstaff's nickname.
Jim, I don't know if you know this or not, and I was reminded of this because I was at Jack's house the other day, but when Willie Stargell retired, he decided to get his picture taken with everybody in the Pirates organization, front office, doctors, broadcasters, whatever. And he made individual plaques for all of us. And then he had signed notes that were laminated. So I have one of those of myself with Willie and a note from Willie. Jack has one as well. Willie, pretty remarkable guy, wasn't he, Jack?
Oh, he was very remarkable. In fact, that is the only picture I have with me with a ball player. I never asked for an autograph. I never wanted a picture. And interestingly enough, it was his idea to have a picture, again, with everybody in the organization. I don't know what it cost him, but it was a handwritten note to each and every person. He was a remarkable guy. In fact, at one point in time, he had a sickle cell foundation, and the management of it was kind of struggling, and he actually asked my wife Carol to maybe take over the running of the sickle cell foundation. And after she examined it, along with his attorneys, the Littmans, they decided to talk him into to dropping it because it was having a lot of financial issues and previous management problems. But he was he was a great. We had a time when there was a work stoppage, and so we were going to take a bus to Cleveland. You remember that, for a practice game. And my son, who was about 12 years old at the time, came along with us. And I sent him to go out on the bus because Tony wanted me to check one of the players who was having an issue. So by the time I got on the bus, Paul was sitting there with Willie Stargell next to him. They were eating potato chips together because Paul had a bag of potato chips. So from that point on, I always referred to my son as PC, potato chips. And at one point in time, he gave my son a picture, a Leroy Neiman print of a little leaguer, an atypical Leroy Neiman. And it said to my friend PC, joy to your life. He was a remarkable guy, and he would come to our house for dinner sometimes. And another funny story with Willie is we used to have ATVs. We had a four-wheeler and a three-wheeler. So in the Swickley Hunt has a lot of horse trails around where we lived. So they went on Paul and Willie went on. He was taking them on the trails, and they got up to the top of a hill where our neighbors had this huge stables with horses out there. He says, "Come on, Willie, I'll show you." He said, "Come on, let's go in, and I want to introduce you to my friends." Now, you have to understand, my son had no concept of Willie being a celebrity other than a baseball player, but it was his friend Willie. So it was an elderly couple, and he goes and he knocks on the screen door, and they said, "Who is it?" And he says, "Paul, come in, Paul." So Willie tells the story. I walk in behind Paul. There's these two gray-haired people sitting on the couch, and when they see me, he said, their eyes popped up, and your son just very clearly said, "Mr. and Mrs. Cole, I want you to meet my friend Willie." And I think that's a really cute story, and it says a lot about Willie and my son at the time, who was very naive. So
These stories, I love the stories.
I do too. You and Jim Bibby were pretty close.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I started, again, I had the opportunity to solve problems that had not been solved or by traditional methods. And so, as you know, I operated on Donnie Robinson, which probably made my chops with the Pirates because, he couldn't pitch. And, with a very quick, short arthroscopic procedure, he got to be back 100% pretty quickly. And Bibby was, he had the same problem. But we would have oftentimes players, and even, as you remember, we had the coaches and the broadcasters at our house for picnics, et cetera. And occasionally we would have a family. So I have two great stories with Jim Bibby. One was he comes over to my house with his family, his wife Jackie and his two daughters. And he and I were playing tennis. At the time, we had a tennis court in our backyard. So we're playing tennis. And he was famous for sweating about 7 or 8 pounds during a game. And I would not change sides with him. But anyway, so we're playing tennis, and my daughter's playing with his two kids out in the front yard. And we had 3 cats at the time. And one cat was a black cat, and my wife named him Bibby. So my daughter was calling the cat, "Here, Bibby, here, Bibby." And his wife, his daughter, Tamara, said, why is your cat named Bibby? And she said, "Well, my mother said he was a pesky cat just like your dad." So she gets kind of huffy. She comes back to the backyard while we're playing tennis, and they always called her dad, they always called him Bibby. Bibby, Bibby, he goes, what do you want, Tam? We're playing tennis here. He says, "We need to get a white dog and call him Jack." And yeah, he was a piece of work. Oh, and we always, for that particular dinner, we had fried chicken and watermelon. And he goes, "Yeah, I understand. Fried chicken, watermelon," because we're here, So those were the days. I can tell you another story, too, that I think I can probably tell the story, but it was right after they said that women sports writers had a right to be in the locker rooms. So this was early on, and he comes out. Bibby was a big guy, 6'4", 6'5". He comes out of the shower with a towel wrapped around him, and he calls me as I'm walking into the training room, and I stop, and he comes over. He starts talking to me, and this female sports reporter comes walking up to ask him a question. He says, I'm talking to the doctor. He says, well, I just have a question. She wanted to ask him a question about, apparently he was on Sports Illustrated holding 9 baseballs in his hand. His hands were so big. She wanted to ask him a question about that and the size of his hands. He goes, well, look, Doc's got big hands too. Look, he put his hand up to my hands. He goes, I wear size 15 shoes. Doc wears size 15 shoes. She's probably wondering, where's this going? He goes, but you know what? That's where it ends. And she starts to blush, and he says, do you know why that's where it ends? She says, oh, why? And he goes, because he had toys when he was growing up. So, character.
Let me spin off because I don't want to miss this part of your life. And I know that you have on the back of your license plate U.S. Navy veteran. You spent a good bit of time when you were in the Navy working with pilots, didn't you?
Yeah, that was my first gig as being a team doctor. I was a Navy flight surgeon. During the Vietnam conflict, all of us doctors were drafted because they needed doctors, even though all the guys I went to college with were either too old or married, to go. And so I spent 6 months in Pensacola at the Aerospace Medical Institute. I became a pilot and a flight surgeon. And then I spent 2 years with an electronic warfare squadron. Fortunately, I was originally supposed to go to Da Nang with the 1st Marine Air Wing, and at the last minute, for whatever reason, they changed my orders to Virginia Beach. So I was with this electronic warfare squadron, and we would travel to exercise the 6th and 7th Fleet. We would attack them, essentially. We were the duty bad guys. And it was a great time. I'm still in touch with a lot of those guys, cream of the crop of American youth. And a lot of them had been great athletes that had that opportunity taken away from them.
Did you fly at all with the crew?
Oh yeah, I flew a lot. I had a chance to break the sound barrier over the Pacific in an F-4 Phantom. We buzzed some climbers on El Capitan in Yosemite, and yeah, it was great. I had a lot of flight time in A4s and F4s at the time, and I still. To this day, I still fly. I still, for about 20 years during my training, I didn't fly. Then I got recertified, and I still fly today.
Tell everyone about your family. You have 4 children. You have, what is it now, 10 grandchildren? Is that correct? You have a son and 3 daughters, and is it 10? Have I got that right?
That's 10, yeah.
10, okay.
I have an older daughter, Anne-Marie, who lives in the Napa Valley. She and her husband started a winery, which to this day is called Failla.
Failla wine.
Yeah, and I have another daughter who, Chris, who lives in Pittsburgh. She's actually in the movie Rudy. She was an actress at one point in time. She went to Boston University.
She's in that scene where the bulletin board, right?
On the bulletin board, and she's talking to D-Bob, I guess what the character's name was. And she went out to Hollywood for a while, and she hated it, but she walked into a bar one time, and she met Ed O'Neill and said, you look just like my dad. Ed O'Neill is Al Bundy. and to this day, I get that, you look like Al Bundy. And then I have a son who lives in Wexford. He has 2 kids, and he was an athlete. He played at North Allegheny. Didn't have any luck in his junior year against Upper St. Clair, but I think they may have had some luck in his senior year. And he was drafted in baseball twice and ended up with the Angels for a while, and he played quarterback at Notre Dame. And then my youngest, who wanted to be a doctor, but when she also went to Notre Dame, and when she found out that she came home over a holiday, and I was on call, and it was a snowstorm. So I went to Ohio Valley to see a lady with a fractured hip, and while I was there, the roads were shut down, et cetera. She ended up in the operating room with me for 24 straight hours, went back to Notre Dame and became an architect. So that's it. Those are my kids. That's my family. I have a wonderful wife who's from Chicago. We met freshman year at Marquette and married my sophomore year in medical school. You're not going to ask me about the Dale Barrow story?
Yeah. I've got to ask you about the Dale Barrow. So Dale's with the Pirates, and he's in the training room.
The only reason I'm prompting you is I see the clock. So it's yeah.
So tell us about the Dale Barrow story.
Oh, well, Dale was on he was getting a treatment from Biggie, Kent Biggerstaff, and so we were just having a casual conversation. I said, Dale, all that stuff that is purported to be said by your dad, I said, did he really say all that stuff? He goes, oh yeah. He goes, and there's a lot of other things that people haven't even heard. I said, well, tell me one. He said, well, one day he's managing the Mets, and it's a Sunday afternoon game. He comes home after the game, and he comes in the house, and he's calling for my mother. Well, she's not home, but my brother Larry's home, and he comes out, looks down into the foyer, and says, she's not here, Dad. She's with Dale. He goes, well, where are they? She said, she took him to see Dr. Zhivago. And Yogi goes, what the hell's wrong with that kid now? That's my Dale Barrow story.
Yeah. So where do we stand now? I mean, I know you've been retired at several years, but where does sports medicine stand now in terms of in your thought process? What do you think about it?
Oh, I think it's continuing to grow with all the innovations, and particularly, as Coach Render knows, there's been knee injuries in football forever, but now we have the means, and it continues to get better, the means to handle them with anterior cruciate ligament reconstructions arthroscopically. Guys are getting back, and we're preserving knees, which is even more important, because I don't care what sport you're talking about. Everybody talks about football. It's ridiculous. There's as many or more concussions in soccer and knee injuries in soccer as there's ever been in football. And people don't read the scientific literature on that. But we are getting to the point where it's kind of a double-edged sword. We're making athletes bigger, stronger, faster, as Coach knows. And so that has its consequences, too. You can see it in the NFL. I mean, these guys they're like guided missiles, some of them. But sports medicine and all that technology is spilled over into regular orthopedic medicine because of the innovations in joint replacements, et cetera. So, I mean, everything's getting better. Materials are getting better. The doctors are getting smarter and more proficient. And hopefully it'll keep our athletes safer for a long period of time. I know my career was cut short by knee injuries. So, and it didn't have to happen today. It wouldn't have happened today. And I might be a better golfer today, Lanny. We could have probably done better at the Invitational.
Yes, we just finished this past weekend, Jack and I, playing in the Invitational at Strictly Heights. Buddy, thank you very much. You know how much I cherish our friendship. I'm so glad that we've had a chance. You are one of the most generous people I have ever met, and I'm blessed that you are such a dear friend. And I know Jim appreciates you coming down making the trip down I-79 to be on our show today.
Likewise, it's an honor. It's an honor to know both of you gentlemen.
Thanks for coming, Jack.
You're welcome.
Your career's
Thank
been
you.
marvelous.
15241 Today Talk. Dr. Jack Failla joining us on the program. Again, our thanks to coordinating producer Linda Denzinski and our producer director Glenn Ward. Thanks for watching.